Lender NMLS number 3030.
The Trevor Carey Show on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. Write it down.
Well, we were all a little bit sickened yesterday, and I was very happy to see it across the spectrum. People very much sicking. The Fresno State Professor Gerard, who called Barbara Bush an amazing racist, threw out other expletives, and said she was, raised a war criminal, an amazing racist. Said she was. The one that seemed to get me the most was because Barbara Bush is gone. I think once we leave, we're not concerned with the cares of this world. But her husband, George H.W. Bush, that tweet of, "I'm so happy that he's sad right now." That one is what really got me. Fresno State's got a mess on their hands. We'll see how they handle this one. I don't like how they've handled the previous ones. We know in the campuses across California, conservatives are attacked left and right. Students are afraid to write their views down, to have discussion in class. They'll get shouted down. A lot of them go to school in fear, and that is so sad. So maybe some good that can come out of all this is the fact that we're talking about this right now. I read her quote in the Fresno Bee today. Lori Prentice is her name, a parent of a potential Fresno State student. Lori, thank you for coming in studio.
And thank you for having me.
You know it. Now, you have two teenagers, right, who are out there eyeballing colleges?
I do. I have students who, we live in a small town, Oakhurst, and the only accessible school is going to be Fresno State, unless they want to move away from home.
Yeah, and you don't want that. You want to do their laundry on the weekends, don't you?
Absolutely. I love laundry.
Now, so many parents, though, who suddenly kind of get that empty nest feel I've heard so many moms who are like, oh, laundry my whole life. But they're like, please, here, I'll do your laundry. You never know until it happens, right?
You can't ever scale Mount Washmore. It just is inaccessible.
It's constant, isn't it?
Right.
Mount Washmore. I like that. Now, Lori, tell me, when you heard this news, let's go back to the professor, lecturer Lars, I'm going to hang Trump, all of this. They've had problems with that big-footed Fred Flintstone professor wiping off the pro-life chalk. How do you feel the university has handled these previously?
It's really difficult to say what should happen when you don't have all the information. Mm-hmm. So I'm the first to say that sometimes there's personnel issues that you aren't aware of, so you have to kind of take that in stride. But I'm relatively happy that there was discipline with the professors so far. However, with this particular professor, I don't feel that it was on the level it needed to be.
All right, but we're still not even 48 hours, I guess, into the situation that transpired. I did notice that you said in your quote in the Fresno Bee that you were willing to wait and see the reaction of the university, but your early inclinations, right, are, I wouldn't write a check to send my kids there with this kind of situation going on.
Basically, the president did not have any statement whatsoever about her maliciously involving the crisis hotline. He did say, we condemn this. This is not acceptable. The representative said that she is allowed to be fired. However, it's more than just a free speech issue. It's more than just her personal vitriol against the world. It is more of a person who is willing to go ahead and take the most vulnerable people amongst us, those people who need the suicide crisis line. Those people do not need to get a busy signal or to get an operator who is trying to rush them off the phone or can't access them because some professor gives their phone number as her number.
Sticks and stones won't break my... what is that? Sticks and stones can... Why can't I remember the saying right? Break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
Right.
Her words weren't hurting people, but her sending out of that phone number sure could have hurt a lot of people. Could have stopped their life.
Basically, to get a person to a point where they are ready to call a crisis number can be very difficult. I work in an environment.
Tell our Power Talk listeners, Lori, a little bit of your homeless in-care outreach that you and your family do in Oakhurst. I find it amazing, actually. Share it.
Well, thank you. Basically, About, I would say, maybe 8 years ago, I didn't really know much about the homeless issue. I didn't really care much about it. I would pass a granola bar through my window at the corner. That's about the extent of my involvement. And then one day I was making my Thanksgiving dinner, and out of nowhere, I just thought I didn't want the food. And I decided to call my pastor, and he hooked me up with a homeless family who had a child. And that day, my husband and I, we drove our children 4.5 hours away, dropped them off so they could still have their Thanksgiving dinner. And we spent Thanksgiving weekend converting the spare bedroom in our home to apartment.
So the night before Thanksgiving, you were waking up to have the American Thanksgiving meal, and you had no inclination that you were going to start an outreach. And within 24 hours, I guess that's called the call hitting you upside the head like with a cast iron skillet or something, right?
Pretty much. That's what happened. And because I became aware and because I was really touched by seeing a child in a situation where they had no food on Thanksgiving, they had very limited resources. So we brought them in, and ever since then, we've been bringing in law-abiding homeless people into the spare bedroom of our house, even into our own bedroom when the spare bedroom of our home was occupied.
Wow. Now, that is called sacrifice and giving, and you know what it's like with people in crisis. Now, Arizona State University official who asked not to be identified said the tweet did lead to an unusually high call volume. They even had to bring on more staff because of this stunt. A stunt is something that could almost be fun for this evil deed this woman did.
Sardonic. Yeah, she was very much in a situation where she took her personal issues and her personal fight and brought it to other vulnerable people who really did need to access help.
So you want to see more from the university, and you had hoped that President Castro yesterday would have broached the subject, right?
Not just broach the subject. I think that's the whole argument. She is putting students' lives at risk. She is endangering the well-being of people who need a crisis line. That is not in any way acceptable.
You know what, Lori? You're making me think that I didn't pound that enough yesterday. Thank you for making an issue of this. I talked about it to an extent yesterday, but I didn't make it the number one issue because we were all mad at our words, right? But now hearing some of the stuff that's coming out and reading your quotes as well made me realize that might actually be the moral clause or something that they can come back around the back door, sneak in, and not have any lawsuit brought against them and can her immediately.
Exactly. If you want to go ahead and fight First Amendment rights, what she said was despicable. What she said was just indicative of a person who doesn't really have the capability of keeping an open mind, in my opinion, in a classroom. So if my daughter were to try and attend a Fresno State English class with her, I would encourage my daughter to speak up and ask for her to apologize, ask for her to resign, ask for her to address how she's going to approach the families of potential victims. The suicide rate has gone up through the roof. The anxiety rate of students, their crisis centers are overwhelmed. During the last 10 years, article after article has been pointing out the fact that these crisis services are in demand and much more needed now than they have been in the past.
You know, Lori, I grew up hearing, hey, we got freedom of speech, but you can't run in a crowded theater and yell fire. You can't have that kind of freedom of speech. What she did, I think, applies under that principle, right? You have the freedom of speech, but you can't go, hey, here's a phone number to call if you're mad at me or whatever, and then ha, 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 ha. That's the same thing as, ha, ha, there's really not a fire, you know.
Exactly. And, I had an instance a couple years back when Black Lives Matters was blocking the highway. And my son is a severe asthmatic. And about a week from that time, he had to access the hospital. Now, if that would have been during the time when they were blocking the highway, that could have provided a very serious problem for me. Right. And I'm sure at that time there were ambulances who had to access emergency services. Now, I am for Black Lives Matters protesting. I'm for anybody expressing their passionate views. That's not the issue. They can express whatever they need to express. And I hope people who have experienced injustice have Godspeed in solving their problems. But when my son or some innocent person has their crisis line access tied up, or when they have the roads blocked to a hospital to where their emergency has to be put on the back burner for somebody's political agenda, that's in
the how dare category.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. My guest is Lori Prentice. She's a parent of a potential Fresno State student, and also she's in the homeless in-care outreach. Lori's making the point here, I think, very well, that the real thing here that could get this this professor in trouble is messing around with people's mental health. I mean, that truly is a how dare. I just looked up some facts today, Lori. In 1990, according to a survey by Higher Education Research at UCLA, 42% of professors were liberal or far left. In 1990, 42. By 2014, that's jumped to 60%. Liberals now outnumber conservatives in teaching roughly 5-1. Very few right-leaning voices in many college students, and they don't get the full spectrum. Then they're being brainwashed, indoctrinated as well.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that when I try and prepare my children for where they want to go to college, it's hard to steer them in any direction.
Send them to Trump University. 559-24-7. Call. Let's go to Steve in Visalia. Steve, you're on with Lori. Hi.
Hey there.
Hi, Trevor. How you doing?
Good.
Hey, Trevor. Let me ask you something. I know everybody's got their opinion, but this lady calls. She talks about all the Iraqis that we killed, or George Bush did, and we were over there saving the people. I mean, this is a professor. Doesn't she know anything about history or what's going on? So I think my opinion is this: she should be fired, but who should be fired with her is the Mr. Castro for hiring her. He interviewed her. They ought to know who these people are. And if he didn't have, he should have the guts to let her go. And if he doesn't, he should be fired too and get somebody else new in there to run the place. And it would make everybody listen.
Well, you know what makes presidents of universities listen? Donors and parents like Lori saying, hey, I don't think I'm too hot on sending my kids to Fresno State unless we're watching you, President Castro. Steve, thanks for that call, man. I appreciate it. Lori, I want to thank you for your time in here and for what you're doing here and standing strong on this. And thank you for making the point about that crisis center. That really was one of her top sins, wasn't it?
I absolutely agree. Thank you so much for having me.
Exactly. And I'll tell you what, we'll check in with you in a few weeks after this has all been decided, and you can give us your thumbs up or thumbs down where your kiddos are going, right?
I appreciate that.
There it is. Yeah. There it is. Guess who has a new book deal? David Hogg, the gun control advocate, high school student, foul mouth, has a new book out. Jordan, Christmas is coming. You know what I might want for Christmas. This is the Trevor Carey Show.